So you and I chatted last night. We had a whole bunch of topics to jump onto today. But before we do, I want to jump into my training folder, and there's some updates I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, I'll share my screen so you can see I'm not making this stuff up. Cool. All right, training folder. This article right here. Florida's June second quarter home sales listings and prices are up. Second quarter. What happened really in the second quarter? Interest rates doubled.
That's right.
Right? Florida Realtors, single family median prices up 19.7% to $420,000. Condo median prices up 26.4% to nearly $325,000. Inventory rising as new listings increases. Wow. How did we get prices going up when interest rates have doubled?
I think we're still in that sugar rush from the interest rates going down, then finally going up. And then I think that the sellers started realizing if we don't sell now, we may miss a good opportunity to hit the top of the market.
But they still say, but where am I going to go?
That's a great question.
Because you got to spend more money on a house now and pay a higher interest rate. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to show that because 19.7%. What does the lower income people do? Where are they going to live? Otis, it's a problem. We still have inquiries in the $200,000, $250,000 price range, but there's almost no inventory for them.
You know, I think that you'll find there's going to be a new market emerging for affordable housing, and it may not be in the urban areas. It's going to probably be on the outlying areas. You know, for the longest time, just on the outside of Riverview, Dade City, Zephyrhills, Hills, all those areas were a good spot. Now even those areas are kind of high, but it might just be on the other side of those. But there's definitely going to be a calling for that because people still want to buy a house. What you may see though is the workforce may move to the kind of outside the urban area.
Well, that's what happens in places like Las Vegas. You know, if you ever talk to the servers or the actors and people in Las Vegas, none of them live in Vegas. They live over the mountains on the other side, and they commute into work.
That's right.
My uncle's house in Texas, in Laguna Beach, all the workers live in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
They got to commute in an hour. And if the one road shuts down, they're screwed. They can't get into the.
Well, and there's a case going on in the Supreme Court regarding a Sarasota house where a guy has a 5-bedroom house and he rented out 4 rooms. And so they're now discussing, is that a homestead or is it not? But what we're finding here is this guy, and it's going to be curious to see what they come up with this particular case study, because in Sarasota, it's all or nothing. Here in the Tampa Bay area, and I just talked to Bob Enriquez yesterday, he's a friend of mine, and he said that they don't really look at it that way. What they'll do is they'll take the part that's rented and they'll make that non-homestead and the rest of it's homestead. But how is the government going to take a look at someone who is homesteaded but yet is renting out the rooms of their house? And that's the only way some people can afford to live where they live, to make the money that, you know, and be in the workforce in the urban areas.
Look at this. This is a website called Boxable. D.R. Horton just took a huge stake in this company. And it's about a 400, not a 300 square foot house. And they send it on a truck and they unpack it within an hour. And it comes with kitchen sinks, bathrooms, toilets, everything. And you can buy it for $50,000.
Wow.
Now it's a house, 1 hour. It's unpacked, comes on a truck, pops it in. So we're trying to speculate what D.R. Horton's going to do. We're thinking there might be guest houses in the back of other lots, which means they'll start developing bigger lots to accommodate other housing. Isn't that kind of cool? Though?
Replace trailer parks.
Yeah, it does.
You know, you get some, I mean, it's not very big, and you get yourself a lot that you can subdivide, which we'll be kind of discussing today. You got to worry about your impact fees if it's a well or sewage, fresh water, or, you know, and then septic. You got to figure that out. But at the end of the day, that's pretty quick and pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's $50,000.
Wow.
So very interesting. Pamela is an agent in our Brandon office, and she asked me to share this with you guys. This is Adams Homes in Polk City, in Polk County. Done any flyers, we're still paying you 3% commission. I don't really have much about it, but Pamela said they got some beautiful product. And they're more affordable because they're in Polk City or Polk County. So that's what we were talking about. You guys, if you're going to work with buyers, you're going to have to get some inventory in lower price ranges and learn it. But what do we recommend?
I'm sorry.
What do we recommend? Getting listings.
Yes.
If you get the listings, everybody works for you.
Mhm.
Like I said, moving to Highlands County. That's what's going to happen. What are the codes for those? Oh, I don't know, John. Read the website. Boxable. Very cool. What else do I have in here? I wanted to share. This blog guy, I follow him, and this is important. I want you all to pay attention to this. Last month, new home contract cancellations hit 14.5%, their highest level in years, outside of the April of 2020 COVID-tainted peak of 16.5%, and are 30% above their seasonally adjusted pre-COVID rate. Similarly, the percentage of pending home sales that fell out of contract in June hit 14.9%, their highest level in years, excluding COVID. What's causing that, do you think?
I think that you have some investors that were coming in with cash. And then as rates start going up, these investors start realizing that they may be investing at the top of the market and they're trying to get out. I personally had a listing that the guy was coming in with cash and he canceled right around the same time. And he let us know that he wasn't really going to be all cash. It was just a cash contract, but he was using hard money. Hard money pulled out for 30 days. And so every one of his contracts were canceled at that point.
Well, I think that's true, but I also think that a lot of people who qualified or bought a new home 4 months ago while it was under construction or to be built, they qualified at a 3% interest rate.
Yeah.
And now the house is finished and they got to requalify at 6%, and a lot of them don't. Which means what?
Yeah, they got to get out of it.
Means the builder has now got inventory that they didn't intend to have.
Oh, yeah.
And what have the builders done? They've increased our commissions. They've added bonuses to move them. And they've added closing cost allowances to buyers so they can buy down their interest rates. Why? They can't afford to have that money sitting there in that house. They built it to sell it. It was sold. They went crazy. Now 14% of the contracts canceling, that's a lot. You think Lennar doing 300 sales a month, 15% of 300, that's 45 contracts falling through. If each house is 300 grand times 45 houses, that's 12 million bucks.
Right.
Right. They'll pay a commission to get that property sold.
That's right.
So that's a cool one to do. And then this is just something I think we need to talk about. Not so much us, but not that I want to be a watchdog or anything, but there's a lot of advertising that is not proper, right? And most of it surrounds around teams, but ads in general. Ads for agents do not have to include a telephone number unless the brokerage office policy requires it. However, the licensed name of the brokerage firm must appear in all real estate ads. So you're seeing a lot of Keller Williams teams advertising, team whatever, and they don't put Keller Williams in there, which branch they're with.
Right.
So you guys, if you're doing any advertising, you have to put the company name. Team advertising. Agents must be in compliance with the team or group advertising rule no later than July 1, 2019, which is almost 2 years ago. It's over 2 years ago. Team or group advertising shall mean a name or logo used by one or more real estate licensees who represent themselves to the public as a team or group. The team or group must perform license activities under the supervision of the same brokerage. So you can't have two agents from different companies team up.
Right.
Each team or group shall file with the broker a designated license to be responsible for ensuring that the advertising is in compliance with Chapter 475. I didn't know that. At least once a month, the registered broker must maintain a current written record of each team's or group's members. Because a lot of teams are out there running like separate brokerages. They hire their own people and they don't tell the broker about it.
That's right.
Team or group names, real estate team or group names may include the word team or group as part of the name. Then it goes on to say, and this is apparent all over the place, real estate team or group names shall not include the following words: agency, associates, brokerage, brokers, company, corporation, Inc., LLC, LP, LLP, or partnership, properties, property, real estate, realty. You can't have any of those words in them. How many teams have those names in them right now?
There's a few.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
This rule applies to all advertising. And advertisements containing the team or group name, the team or group name shall not be in larger print than the name of the registered brokerage. All advertising must be in a manner which reasonably persons would know they are dealing with a team or a group within the brokerage. Number 7, all advertisers must comply with these requirements no later than July 1, 2019. I'm still seeing them out there. So if you see it, I'm not saying to report them, but tell them, hey, you better follow up on your advertising rules. When Joel Brumbach was with us, he was Joel Brumbach, Team Brumbach Realty Group. Can't say it. Can't do it. So we are subject to Chapter 475. And I enabled the chat. I learned how to do that. Oh, Pam says Adams Homes locks their rate for 90 days at no charge to the buyer, that they'll pay closing costs with a preferred lender. They're around 3 months or less for the build, give or take, in the North Lakeland area. And the rate lock for 90 days is a nice thing.
Yeah, especially right now with the uncertainty of what's going to happen. The Fed's supposed to meet again next week, and people are kind of freaking out.
Yep. Zillow is dropping prices. They bought too high. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't really, I kind of like that. I don't know. I mean, it's you saw them come in and be the 800-pound gorilla. They've certainly influenced our market.
Oh yeah.
And so something like this shows that even the 800-pound gorilla is not invincible.
All right. That was it. That's all I had starred for today. I wanted to clear up my inbox though, so that works for me. All righty. Stop my chair. Okay, Otis. Answer this technically correctly. Can I list a property in Key West?
Can you list a property in Key West?
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
You need to make sure you're part of their MLS to make sure you get the full exposure and so forth and be compliant. But yeah, absolutely.
Now, should you list a property in Key West?
If you don't know the market,
No.
I mean, it's not like Key West is huge, right? But at the end of the day, we're up here, and Key West is a pretty good flight, drive, and boat ride away.
Yeah, you got to fly to the airport, get a taxi to put your lockbox on the house. They
Right.
probably don't have the same lockbox system or MLS system.
Mhm.
You don't know the market. Yes, you refer it out. I mean, if it's a lay down listing, you'll find somebody that'll take a referral fee of 25, 30, 35, 40%.
Absolutely.
And a hell of a lot smarter than spending the time. So I don't want to be a jerk when people ask me questions like this, but that's the answer. Refer it out. You're not an expert. I wouldn't take a listing in Miami either, unless I lived in Miami.
Right.
Cool. I did that one. Okay. I asked you for some topics yesterday, and we talked about number 1, extending the closing, but not the loan approval.
Yeah, that's some house cleaning I'd like to discuss.
These
I'm
are
seeing
problems.
oftentimes. Yeah, well, we're extending contracts, but we're not extending the loan approval or the financing contingency. And I'm seeing it not just I'm seeing it really on the other side more than our side, but it needs to be discussed because sometimes we get in the moment where we want to extend the contract a little bit, but financing contingency stays the same. And just be aware of that on your side. Same with
Let's talk about it on your side. If I'm the listing agent, you want to extend the closing date, I'd say fine, but I'm not letting you move the financing contingency.
correct.
Right? You got your 20 to 30, you got 30 days for loan approval.
Mhm.
So that's what you got. You want to extend the closing, that's fine, but you're extending it without financing contingencies.
Correct.
Now, if I'm the buyer and I'm requesting the extension, what am I going to ask for?
Yeah, you want to get that, that's for sure, because it might be right now what I'm seeing in the field is insurance isn't instantaneous like it used to be. You can't just get a quote and bind it. It takes a few more days, and that's sometimes what's clogging up the financing contingency by itself.
Well, and there's something more dangerous than that. Your as is contracts people, you guys are writing as is contracts a lot.
Mhm.
You have an inspection period and then you go hard, right? Your inspections are over.
Mhm.
What we're finding now in a lot of cases is insurance is not being approved for that particular house. And if
Right.
it is, it's gonna be super expensive and the buyer can't cancel anymore.
Mhm.
My neighbor's got a new roof right now down the street and she's owned the house for 35 years and it's never leaked. And I said, did you have leaks? And she said, no. And I said, why'd you put a new roof on? She said, my insurance company was going to cancel me if I didn't put a new roof on.
Yeah.
That's because it's 35 years old. That's a $58,000 roof
Wow.
that wasn't leaking. So
You know,
what's
it's
that going
funny.
to do?
Yeah, I'm considering being proactive and replacing my roof. It's great, but the cost of replacing a roof is only going to go up.
Yep.
And I know sooner or later I'm going to get that letter from the insurance company myself.
Mhm. So what does that mean? So I've got an as-is contract, a 7-day inspection period. I haven't shopped for my insurance during the inspection period. I go shop for insurance and I find out they're not going to insure me unless I get a new roof, which is happening. For those agents coming to our top agent luncheon in Orlando next week, we are, I'm having an insurance company come in to talk just about that for us because it really is a problem. What did she tell me? Her insurance was going to cost more than putting the new roof on. So that's just not a good idea. So extending closing, but no loan approval. I'm adding to that. I'm not quite sure how to word it the way I want to say it, but it's almost worth putting a contingency in, subject to buyer obtaining suitable insurance to their preference, no later than a date. You almost need a contingency for it now if it's your buyer and you don't know, which means to me, it puts it on the listing agent to maybe start exploring. Who was talking to us the other day? I think it was you, where you said you did a showing and the listing agent had everything laid out for him.
No, that wasn't me, but that's what I'm looking at doing as a listing agent. I have a listing that's going to be coming on, and we got a 4-point inspection and a roof certification just to know where we stood.
Good.
And,
That's what I'm talking
and that's
about.
going to be attached to MLS.
There you go. So guys, listing agents, you're going to sound like a wimp, but you're going to find a problem. It's not a problem until it is, right?
That's correct.
So if your deal falls apart because of insurance issues, it's just as much your fault now because you're aware. So get the seller to figure that stuff out. Have your insurance person, get an estimate before you go on the market. And if it's good, share it. And if it's not, talk about it. I don't know about that. Insurance cannot be bound without a 4-point inspection. Probably not today.
Not today, no.
Yeah.
And you have to, what I found is you have to almost go one step farther. That's why we got the roof certification, because the insurance or the 4-point might be all right, but some of the insurance companies have gotten a little stricter than that, and they're still wondering what the effective age is going to, or what the life expectancy is, and they're binding it on that. And so,
yeah, so it's just getting more and more and more complicated, which means more and more agents are going to get out of the business because they don't know it. You work hard, get your deal done, they keep falling apart because you're making mistakes. Not a good thing. All right, topic number 2. Escrow coming in late.
Yeah.
What's the problem with that?
It's breach of contract. Give the extension.
It is a breach of contract. Lauren says, as soon as we go into contract, I send my clients 3 insurance contacts. Yeah, I'd even start looking now that you're not in such a rush to get the house. You can start getting insurance quotes on houses. You can just call Florida Best Quote is a good company. There's a lot of good agents there. John just talked about Nina at Florida Best Quote. There's a bunch of them there. I think it's just a really important topic for us to be aware of right now. And start preparing customers to deal with it. So escrow coming in late, the contract says that the earnest money is due when you say it's due. And then the contract says a breach of contract includes failure to make a deposit when due. And the penalty of failing to make the deposit when due is forfeiture of all deposits paid and agreed to be paid. So the contract says $5,000 initial deposit with a $5,000 additional deposit, and you miss the $5,000 first deposit, the buyer has to forfeit 10. Now, how do you do that in practice? Because we're dead right.
What I've seen is if it doesn't come in, you get sued. I've seen a lawsuit on that where
that's what it's going to take.
Okay, we didn't turn in the escrow, so we're just going to cancel. And that didn't work out the way they hoped it would. And the attorney actually sued them, the attorney of the client. And then they settled. And this was a $50,000 deposit that was supposed to be brought in. And they thought they could just get out of it by not turning in the deposit and canceling. And it was on day 4 or 5, very sloppy. And from there, it was tied up. And the fact that they also canceled, we put the house back on the market. But 8 months later, they're settling out of court for 40 grand.
Wow. And they've probably spent 20 grand on attorney fees,
That's exactly right.
right? So once again, my points, I don't make this stuff up, you guys. I want big deposits that are worth fighting for. You put
Mhm.
$1,000 deposit down, it has no effect at all, right? A buyer will walk away from $1,000. The seller's not going to rejoice in collecting $1,000. And if you fail to make it, your claim is you can get a deposit for $1,000. It's going to cost you $5,000 to sue
And I think the interpleader just to get it into the court system is about $1,000 anyhow. So you're going to
Yes.
be fighting for nothing.
them. So I'd like a nice chunky deposit with an additional deposit at the end of the inspection period. It keeps everybody honest and makes your deals close. So
I
that's just little advice things we're talking about. Number 3, loan approval versus commitment from seller, a lender. I'm having conversations with agents about this frequently, more frequently than I should.
Mhm.
And it's mostly agents who've been around for a while. Because it used to be you had to get a written loan commitment from a lender
Mhm.
to satisfy your lending contingency.
Right.
But they changed the contract 2 versions ago, and they took away the written loan commitment and they asked for what's called a loan approval.
Mhm.
And they changed it a lot because who makes the decision whether their loan is approved or not?
It kind of goes between buyer and seller now.
It's just from the buyer. When the buyer tells the seller, I've got my loan approved, then they remove their financial contingency, financing contingency. I'm shivering this morning. So I've got agents saying, well, the lender didn't give me a loan commitment yet. I don't care, right? Your contract says loan approval is due within 30 days unless you change the date. So if today is July 22nd, on August 22nd is your loan approval date. Buyer says, hey, seller, I got my loan approval. And then we say, seller, good news, your buyer no longer has finance contingency. Looks like you're going to close.
Right.
Right. But what if we make our closing date 25 days and we don't change the loan approval period? It defaults at 30 days.
Correct.
So your buyer can say on the day of closing, sorry, I didn't get loan approval, and they get their deposit back.
Right.
So you want to move those dates in tandem. So
That's
if your
correct.
loan approval date is August 22nd, your closing date better be after August 22nd.
Mhm.
And I like 5 or 6 days to give the seller time to, do the things they need to do.
There's a couple good questions that came in.
Okay. Once you cover those.
All right. So one was, as a seller, do you only accept offers with a large deposit? Well, that's a great question, Michael. And I personally think that it should be large enough to hurt if they try to
agree.
walk away.
Well, let's take an
sometimes
example.
you're not gonna-
It's an FHA buyer.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one.
It's 3.5%, but an average house now is 400 grand. 3.5% of 400 grand is 12,
Mhm.
over $12,000. That's hard enough to hurt.
That's right.
Get the whole deposit up front.
Yeah, the tough ones are the VA because there's 100% financing. But generally with VA, they got enough money to put down a deposit, and then they'll get the
We'll get it
money
back. It closes.
Yeah, or it goes towards closing costs, but it still can be enough to hurt. They can't just walk away.
I agree. Lauren said I recently had a buyer stop payment on an escrow deposit. Yeah, that's a breach of contract. And it's a problem because when the deposit's not made, then you can't keep it. You can't not give it back to them. You got to sue. But if it's not worth suing for, it's not a big enough number, you're just kind of screwed.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's especially when you start messing with we talk about affordable housing and so forth, and a lot of times with affordable housing, those are a smaller transaction, and people don't want to put down a lot of money on those transactions. But in my opinion, it's got to be enough to hurt. And so, you're not going to probably get a $10,000 deposit on a lot of $350,000 to $400,000 transactions, but $5,000 for them, that still hurts. They can't just walk away with.
And it's okay to counter with that. And I wish you guys would counter more because I see you guys afraid to counter an offer because they didn't want to offer more deposit. You're taking your listing off the market,
right,
for a period of time. And if it doesn't close, your seller's out of pocket that extra mortgage payment and all that other stuff. That is really your fault.
Yeah.
We don't want to play those games anymore.
Well, and if you can at least get the mortgage payment out of it, that's at least you kind of got a soft landing for a contract that fell apart.
John says his standard practice is a 2% for the first escrow and 2% for the second escrow. This basically covers closing costs. That's good.
Good practice.
Yeah, and the guy that Lauren had a $6,000 deposit and he canceled it. He says, yeah, tell him to sue me. Because you
Yeah.
can't sue over $6,000. It's not worth it. And I told him he wanted to continue working with me. He will not do that again. That's dirty pool, guys. It really is. Now, if he had made his deposit, he probably would have gotten it back under some pretense somewhere.
Mhm.
Right. And you should know how to do that now. Okay. So what value is a loan commitment anymore?
I mean,
It makes the buyer feel comfortable to tell the seller.
right.
But other than that, it doesn't matter to us. Once the buyer tells the seller, he's good to go and his deposits are. Now, should we hide that from the buyer or we should let them know?
Well, our buyers, we should let them know.
Absolutely. That's why we have a critical date timeline that tells them all the dates that are important.
That's right.
Loan approval is due on the 30th day unless you modify it sooner. Okay, our big topic today is the land contracts.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions on land contracts.
You want to
And
pull
I
it
think
up?
that, circling back to the very beginning of the conversation, you showed us was it boxable?
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to write that down, but that's perfect for someone who can't afford a house in the urban area. You go get yourself a piece of land, a $50,000 house that gets delivered on a truck. You do your impact fees, make sure you got a well, a septic, or sewage and plumbed in water and electric. You're ready to rock and roll. But that starts with the land contract.
it does. So, oh my goodness, what is this? There we go. No, I'm good. All right, I'm gonna allow this. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so I went to .loop. I'm gonna go to my templates. All right, I'm logged in the wrong way. Hold on. And what do I want? Contracts?
Vacant land contract. Yeah. If you have, I may have mine already up if you.
Okay, you can do it.
Hang on.
Think of the deposit as a negotiation tool, right? If you submit an offer for 400 on a house and I submit an offer for 400 a house and I put $100,000 down and you put $10,000 down, who looks more serious?
Yeah.
I do, right? And if I'm going to put 25% down anyway, I should have that money. That makes me feel pretty good if I'm going to the financing buyer.
All right. I'm sharing now. Can you see it?
Yep.
Very good.
Okay, so which version is this? Scroll down to the bottom left-hand corner.
This is going to be the 2021. The one that is the most recent one in our document.
VAC 14, March of 2021.
So, just simple stuff with land contracts. You'll see here that it's very similar to a regular residential contract. I mean, you've got buyer, seller. What you will see is sometimes land doesn't have an address. And so you got to go to the legal description to really figure out, and hopefully it has an APN number. And that way you can start identifying the land. The legal description of it's going to tell you everything.
Well, let's talk about different types of land first.
Yes.
Like I know Susie in our office is, I always say Susie, I'm not talking about this Susie, but in this case, I'm talking about our Susie. She's trying to buy 10 acres.
Mhm.
They want to build a new home on 10 acres. She sold her house and made a lot of money on it. And now she's trying to find 10 acres. And she's finding 10 acres on the market in different places, but none of the agents she's dealing with know anything about the land they're selling. The first one, I coached her on due diligence. And the first one, there was no ingress or egress to the property. No deeded ingress or egress. It was landlocked. And so she's trying to solve the problem. And I said, no, you go to the seller and tell him he's got no ingress or egress. He better get it. So he's got to go to the adjacent property owners and get them to deed him part of his property, part of their property, which is going to cost him money.
Mhm.
But a listing agent should have figured that out before they put it on the market.
Yeah. And otherwise you got to take a helicopter to your piece of property you just bought.
That's pretty hard. And the other thing she found is one house per 10 acres. And there's a piece of property out there. There's a 5-acre piece of property for sale in a neighborhood that's zoned 1 house per 10 acres. So what the hell do you do with that?
You gotta start looking at the zoning and doing your research ahead of time.
And that was in Manatee County, which is different than Hillsborough County, which is going to have different rules than Pinellas County, which has no vacant land anyway. But so simply, you'll find residential lots like a subdivision, unit 4, block 2, lot 3. Those are easy, right?
Yeah.
You know what you're getting and you can see water and sewer. But one of the pieces of property she was looking at, the water main was a half a mile down the road. So she had to run water a half a mile to get to her property if she bought that property.
Mhm.
And nobody's disclosing this stuff or knowing about it. So it really is a big job. And if somebody wanted to become an expert in that, you really can do a really nice job, because there's a lot of land out there that could be sold that nobody's working and nobody knows about.
That's exactly right.
So that would be a great farm if you wanted to pick that up, because there's a huge demand for it now. People
Yeah, put a boxable on there. You could put 15 boxables on that thing.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah,
That's
and one of the things that I'm seeing is there's a difference in inspection period. It's called a feasibility study.
But very, very.
Yeah, and that doesn't just mean you're inspecting the land, but you're inspecting the municipal guidelines and zoning and everything around that. So that way, when you do get into it, you're not buying a house that's zoned for 10 acres, but you only have 5. That you're getting yourself into a bad deal if something like that happens. And so knowing what you're getting yourself into is pretty important. Another one I'm seeing is wetlands. They're advertising 5 acres, but 2.75 is wetlands and unbuildable. And so you're truly getting, you're getting less than half of buildable land that you think.
Well, it's worse than that, because the wetlands have a setback.
Correct.
Right. So I own a piece of property on the river, and there's a 50-foot line back from the water edge that I can't build within.
Mm-hmm.
The lot's huge. It's 3/4 of an acre, but the building pad is very small compared to what 3/4 of an acre you think you could build on. Because I got river lines. The land I'm selling right now, the 15 acres on the bay, we've been in feasibility study now for over a year.
Wow.
Right. And we just found out literally like 2 weeks ago that Hillsborough County Schools Board refused our permit because there's not enough school capacity for the elementary or senior high schools.
Wow.
Which is a joke on this piece of property, because there's going to be 44 home sites and they're all going to be multi-million-dollar homes, and most of them aren't going to have kids. But they're going to deny our permit for that. But our governor just signed a law bill on July 1st. It's called a non-participation agreement. And if the developer will sign that, he can prepay the school impact fees up front, and they'll grant our permit. Because generally when you build on vacant land, you got to pay impact fees, because your building is going to impact the roads and the water and the sewer and the police department and the fire department, and all those things get impacted by your building. So when a new development comes in, we'll probably pay $15,000-$20,000 in impact fees per building, which is all part of the construction of the home. Which you've got to know if you're buying land and you're going to hire a builder. So the builder's got to pay the impact fees for you, so that's be built into the cost of your home. Right. So we have a lot and block, which are easy to buy. Then you got vacant land, which has a whole bunch of unknowns. And is there water to the property? Is there sewer to the property? Can you build well and septic out there? Right. What else do you need for due diligence? Zoning. How many units per acre? How do you get that information?
The municipal.
Yeah, you got to call the county or the city or whatever department it is and get that information. And most listing agents aren't doing it.
And Craig, what I'm seeing also, like up in Dade City area, Dade City used to be all orange groves.
Yep.
And back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it wasn't regulated on what they sprayed those orange groves with. And that's been in the ground for quite some time. So it makes sense to bore down and do a soil sample, so that way you know what you're getting yourself into. Some of that area is just contaminated.
Yeah.
And so you might buy something, and then when you finally get into it, you found yourself on some bad land.
John brings up a good point. He says, after you call the county to find out what's going on, get them to put it in writing too.
Yeah. Follow up with an email.
Because
absolutely,
the clerk can tell you something and you can misconstrue it. It comes in writing, then it's able to be understood.
That's right.
Once you scroll down to the feasibility period, let's read some of the language they have in there. And remember, the contract's between the buyer and the seller. So who's supposed to do this stuff? The buyer or the seller? As a listing agent, I've talked to a lot of sellers that don't know anything about their property, right? And they want to sell it for a lot of money. And it just doesn't work that way, especially if it's commercial.
Yeah.
Or if
And,
or if it's potentially commercial. That's my favorite.
well, and there's also and they're calling it a due diligence period on this contract.
It did change. It used to be feasibility for sure.
That's right. And, there's another case study that's going to be happening here in New Tampa. Pebble Creek Golf and Country Club is trying to basically turn into a development. Well, what they sprayed that grass with for decades you can't build a house on it. It's too contaminated, especially around the tee boxes. So they're going back and forth on what do you do with that land because it's not solvent as a golf and country club anymore. And you're changing the zoning for all those homes that were built on a golf club course. But more importantly, you can't even do anything with the land because it's been sprayed for decades with pesticides. And so you're seeing your own little case study right here in our backyard.
Wow. Well, when you're dealing with a bank and you're buying vacant land, very often, most often, the bank's going to require what's called a phase 1 environmental audit.
That's right.
That's an expensive report, but it's a cursory look to see if there's any problems like you're mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a hint that there's problems, they're going to demand a phase 2 environmental study report, which is even more expensive, right? So I kind of like it when a buyer is working with a bank because the bank's going to ensure that they're lending on good property.
That's right.
They're going to test the hell out of it, right? So soil borings are important. There's just so many things.
Figure out how it's zoned, if it can be rezoned, what the process to be rezoned would be. If it can be, like we have a property in South Tampa that we're getting a bonus variance on it. And so that was a future land use map back in 2009 went into effect in 2014. It's a 50 by 150 lot. And we're going to tear down the house, but it's short by about 2 feet on each side, put 4 units. But we're getting it rezoned and getting a bonus variance on there. We can actually put 4 units on it. And so the property value goes up, but it's going to cost about 30 grand to do that. But you can also get an extra unit out of there because in South Tampa, as you know, we do a lot of development. So we'll sell those units for 700 to 900,000 a piece.
Yeah, very nice. It's kind of small on my screen, but read some of those lines. It says buyer may conduct a phase 1 environmental assessment. Buyer, they can do anything they want that's necessary for them to satisfy their needs.
Yeah,
right?
I tell you what, I'll take it from due diligence period and just kind of work my way down here, which is line 138, due diligence period. Buyer will at buyer's expense and within, if left blank, 30 days.
Which is almost never enough for a study like this, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Which is almost never enough time.
No, yeah. Generally, you need to get more time. I've had some lots you have to push all your way through it.
If it's a subdivision lot that it's a lot and block, yeah, you can do it in 30 days. But if it's vacant land out in the middle of somewhere that you don't have, and the seller doesn't have a current survey, you're going to have to get
I had a lot where we had to bush hog our way to the middle of the lot just to get the boring in. And so you have to buy you have to rent the bush hog service if you can do it yourself, or you have to buy the service for someone else to do it for you. So after effective date, the buyer's sole and absolute discretion determine whether the property is suitable for buyer's intended use. During the due diligence period, buyer may conduct a phase 1 environmental assessment and any other test, analysis, surveys, and investigations, inspections, basically, that the buyer deems necessary to determine, to buyer's satisfaction, the property's engineering, architectural, and environmental properties, zoning and zoning restrictions, subdivision statutes, soil and grade, availability of access to public roads, ingress and egress, right? Water and other utilities, consistency with local, state, and regional growth management plans, availability of permits, government approvals and licenses, and other inspections that buyer deems appropriate. If the property must be rezoned, buyer will obtain the rezoning from the appropriate government agencies. Seller will sign all documents buyer is required to file in connection with the development of or rezoning approvals. Seller gives buyer, its agents, contractors, and assigns the right to enter the property at any time during due diligence period for the purpose of conducting inspections, provided, however, that the buyer, its agents, contractors, and assigns enter the property and conduct inspections at their own risk. Buyer will indemnify and hold seller harmless from losses, damages, costs, claims, and expenses of any nature, including attorney's fees, expenses, and liability incurred in application for rezoning or related proceedings, and from liability to any person arising from the conduct of any and all inspections or any work authorized by buyer. Buyer will not engage in any activity that could result in a construction lien being filed against the property without seller's prior written consent. If this transaction does not close, buyer will, at buyer's expense, repair all damages to the property resulting from the inspections and return the property to the condition it was in before conducting the inspections, and release to seller all reports and other work generated as results of the inspection.
That's a big one right there.
Yes.
So the buyers I was just talking about that I'm working with, they spent they got a $400,000 deposit down, first of all. And they've got $500,000 in soft costs they've already spent on their investigations engineering. And their contract is contingency free. So they just found out there's no permits right now. And they're trying to get an extension, and we don't have to give them one. And if we don't give them one, we keep the $400,000 deposit, and they have to give us the $500,000 worth of work they've already done. That is called high stakes poker, and my sellers
Sure is. Wow.
So they don't close, they lose $900,000 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do you think is going to happen?
They're going to do everything they can to close.
I believe so.
And Craig, what I was just talking about, also the one in South Tampa lot, we're doing the zoning bonus variance, right? Or the bonus variance for the zoning, and we encourage our buyer to have everything in his name. God forbid you put that in the seller's name, and then it falls apart. Now the seller's got a more valuable piece of land because it was rezoned, and there's a variance for the bonus density that can be applied to it, and they got a more valuable piece of land because they changed the zoning on it.
Well, that's the question, right? So if I put it in my name without the zoning, then there's no guarantee I get the zoning. So I'm buying something with no guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to take that risk, I could do it to put it in my own name. There's no way the seller's going to put it in my name while he owns it.
Right.
Right. Cool. Before the expiration of the due diligence period, buyer must deliver written notice to seller of buyer's determination of whether or not the property is acceptable. Buyer's failure to comply with this notice requirement will constitute acceptance of the property as suitable for the buyer's intended use in its as-is condition. If the property is unacceptable to the buyer and written notice of this fact is timely delivered to the seller, this contract is deemed terminated and buyer's deposit will return. That becomes a very, very critical date for a vacant land contract.
Absolutely.
You tell me it works, or you tell me it doesn't within the 30-day period if left blank. Which I'm telling you. So advice. Buyers should not be buying land on their own without a contractor involved who's familiar with the county and the area they're building in.
That's
right. So I've got Susie working with a local builder that is familiar with building in rural areas. And he knows the rules for all this, and he's guiding her to do the due diligence. She's really smart doing her own research too, but there's a contractor involved that knows, how much is it going to cost to bring water to the site, right? How do you get Tico to put a junction box in for you? Yeah. There's a whole bunch of unknown stuff there that a lot of us really shouldn't be dealing with, unless you want to do it. And I told Susie, I said, now where this area is, why don't you really make that your farm? Get all the assembled packages together and start. I mean, there's a lot of people looking for a 5 or 10 acre parcel of land just to live their way, and you could build a house now for about $200 a foot. It's about $200 a foot for a house. So if the 2,000 square foot house goes for 400 grand, buys land for 200 grand, $600,000 brand new house on 10 acres. That's a big deal.
It is. And you think about all the experience she's gaining just by doing that research to do what she wants to do.
Yep, a lot.
One thing before we move on, I wanted to point out up here, it says that the seller has to give the buyer the ability to get on the land and do the inspection. So if you have gated off or fenced off property and you're the seller's agent, you got to make sure your seller does not impede the process of not allowing them on the land.
Yep.
And I've seen some weird scenarios where the seller's like, no, nobody's getting on my land without my permission. This and that. Well, no, you gotta give them the ability to get on there at almost any time so they can do their due diligence. Otherwise, you're impeding the process of their investigation.
Well, I've got two guys that reached out to me. One guy owns, it's a 5-acre piece. It's in Ruskin, in the middle of Ruskin. Single family homes right across the street from it. It's fenced off, and it's got, I want to say there's 4 different padlocks on it. On the chain fence. So 4 different people can get in. And it's a friend of mine who keeps his boat trailer there. So I use his boat trailer so I could get on his property. And he's got a big warehouse shed on there. And, he's thinking 5 acres, it's agricultural zoned, but it's got some out parcel building on it. He wants to sell it and wants me to help him value it. Well, how do you value a 5-acre agricultural piece of property in Ruskin, surrounded by single family homes? You got to talk, and it backs up to a railroad track.
Ugh.
So, you get into all these problems. So you come up with what's highest and best use, something like that. And this is just me talking out loud because this is problems I'm having. I'm thinking somebody in my neighborhood, there's a bunch of people that have some money, right? And they got RVs and they've got Ferraris and all kinds of different stuff in their garages. They got jacks in their garages, 2 cars that stack on top of each other. There's a lot of that in here. So some guy would buy that piece of land if it was priced right, just to be a playpen to keep his toys, his RV and his this and that and the other thing, and own some land, right? So I'm trying to think, so that might be one way. So when you're dealing with land, it's, as a listing agent, what is the highest and best use? And there's no answer to that.
Yeah.
But you kind of come up with one and say, well, what if we marketed it as a playpen palace, right? That would be one way to go for it. What else would we do? We could market it to builders who would probably want to take it to rezoning to see if we can get it rezoned to single family. But is that best use when you're backing up to a railroad track?
Right.
Probably not. Another guy has a farm on Shell Point Road in Ruskin. It's a 1-acre farm, and he has its vertical garden. He's growing potted plants or fruits and vegetables in a hydroponic garden, and it's an acre, and it's right on Shell Point Road, but it's once again zoned agricultural. So can you do a neighborhood building there? It's on the same railroad track. I just don't know what to do with them. So I'm just kind of wandering around. Something's going to pop in my head one day, and neither one of them being responsive right now anyway, but that's kind of the game with vacant land. What is its highest and best use, or what uses you make it be good for, and keep it in line without having to go through rezoning.
I agree. Yeah. And in some cases, if it's in an urban area, this is a common game that we play in South Tampa. If we find, in South Tampa and in certain areas, there was a construction boom after World War II. So there's a lot of homes built in the 50s and 60s that are not very big. However, they're on a large parcel of land. Maybe it's a 1/4 acre or whatever the case may be. And again, the city of Tampa knows that they have to prepare for a more dense city down the road, more population. And so they rezoned it, and they have a future land use map. And if you understand that land use map, you understand that certain properties you can tear it down and put a multifamily on there, and the city's going to allow that zoning to happen because they understand that they need housing for more people that's coming to the city itself. You'll find that area by Armature Works. What's going to happen there is they're already starting to assemble land there. Over the next 10 years, it's going to change with us or without us, but there's going to be 3 and 4 and 5-story apartment buildings that are going to be put in that area, and you're going to find it's going to be more and more common over the next few years. And then you're going to have that one little house, like the movie Up. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie Up. It's a Disney movie, but it's that tiny little house between all these big buildings, right? And the land is great. The land is great, but they want to hold on to the house, So you're going to see that a little bit as well. But at the end of the day, if you understand that and you're going into it in the urban areas, you can really turn that into a little gold mine. And just by the knowledge of understanding it, you're a valuable person, an asset to a lot of investors.
Yep. I go to St. Pete a lot, and is it 5th Avenue North? It's really populated, and those houses are now old. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like you guys are doing in South Tampa, I think that area, it's in the heart of Pinellas County. It's very
Right.
easily accessible to the interstate. Those houses are old. Yeah, I think they're almost to the tear down stage. And I think we all need to be on the lookout for that too.
Absolutely.
Tear down. But when you're dealing with 30, 40, 50-year-old homes, it's not, and they're in good areas. I think you're going to see some tear down opportunities.
Absolutely. I just sold a house. I never thought I would sell this house for more than $500,000 in our lifetime, except for whenever COVID hit and everything went up. But it is a house built in '59. It sold for over $500,000 because of the property. And so and then if you look around it, there's new construction all around where people are tearing down, building up, or they're in some cases leaving a wall or two up so they don't have to worry about the impact fees, but they're expanding the house that was there and turning it into a little McMansion with the second story.
I built my career selling vacant lots in this neighborhood that I'm sitting in right now. And it's so funny to me to remember the past because I think I had 14 lots on that one street for sale. One owner owned them all. It's a really cool retired dentist from New York. And we would talk every year for Christmas. And I just finally got his listings from him 20 something years ago. And I wasn't selling them, but there were so many lots for sale. I mean, hundreds of lots in my neighborhood for sale. And he wanted me to sell his fast. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? I'm selling them as they come, but they're going to take time. And the absorption rate was just not there. So I talked him into building a house, and I had a builder friend of mine design a very affordable house. 2,100 square feet was the minimum you could build on that street on a 70-foot lot on the water. And back then, and I wish I could remember the year, it's probably 95-ish, no, probably 98-ish. We built that house and marketed it for sale, home and lot, complete. We spec'd it. So my homeowner, my landowner, paid the builder directly to build this house. And we put it on the market for $199,900. And that same house just closed last month for $979,000.
Wow.
No pool.
And that's why they say real estate builds wealth.
Real estate, good real estate held long enough always appreciates. But $199,000. Now this is when my kids are gonna look at me, Dad, why didn't you buy it?
Yeah.
Right? Because that was a lot of money back then.
One of the things we should probably approach also, Craig, is a coastal construction area and how those variances have changed over the years. Because what used to be a good property, now you can't build on in some cases because of the line that's been moved over the years. And you have some homes that are grandfathered in, but when that house is done, you can't do anything with the land anymore.
Well, it's not so much that. If the house gets destroyed by a natural disaster or fire or something, you may not be able to rebuild it.
That's right.
Right. So if you're selling that house to somebody, and the coastal construction, can think of other words, coastal, if it's on the coast, not across the street from the coast. If it's on the coast, on the ocean, on the Gulf of Mexico, or on the Atlantic Ocean, there's a construction control line that you have to build like within 50 feet of. So if let's say your lot is 200 feet deep and the line comes in 50 feet into your property, then you got to build another 50 feet back from that. So now you're at 100 feet, then you got a front setback too, and it might render the lot unbuildable. And what they're trying to do is really knock away building on the beachfront because they're the most traumatically hit by storms, and it's a lot of money to maintain them and all that other stuff. So that line is very important, but don't freak out over unless you're selling something on the sand.
That's right.
Right. Is the contractor liable? Yeah, a contractor would be liable for misstatements, but they'd have to be in your employ. No, they're just helping you out.
All right. So there is a no due diligence period. It's kind of like waiving your inspection.
Yeah, that's a really bad idea unless you're intimate with the property.
Yeah, unless you already know what's going on and you're very familiar. But the coastal construction line is right here at D, line 177.
If any part of the property lies seaward of the CCCL as defined herein, seller will provide buyer with an affidavit or a survey as required by law delineating the line's location on the property. Who has to do it? The seller. How do you do that? You hire a surveyor. And the surveyor will draw the survey and show where the line is. Unless buyer waives this requirement in writing. The property being purchased may be subject to coastal erosion and to federal, state, and local regulations that govern coastal property, including delineation of the CCCL, rigid coastal protection structures, beach nourishment, and the protection of marine turtles, and all that stuff. Additional information can be obtained from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, including whether there are significant erosion conditions associated with the shoreline of the property being purchased. And then buyer can waive the right to get that survey, which I would never recommend.
Correct.
Mhm. That's kind of it. When you get to vacant land, that's the most important. And, you know, I want to stress this again. We are the realtor, right?
Yeah.
We are not the investigator. The buyer needs to walk into this with an expert on their team who does this, and it's not you or me. We're just brokering the transaction between buyer and seller. The contract, no one here says the realtor is going to do this, the realtor is going to do that. Buyer's going to do this, seller's going to make sure they can do it, seller's going to allow them to do it, but it's them doing it. So it's a serious game, and really we shouldn't be playing with it until we're really good at it, unless it's a subdivision lot and block. If it's a lot 2, block 4, lot 7, not much. And there's a house on one side, a house on the other, and you can see the water line and the Tico power pole.
Yeah.
You're probably good.
Right. Well, and I think if we circle back around, ingress, egress. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's no way to get to the property, then you right now you have a big issue. You have to helicopter in. And
Yeah,
so
you can't even find the corners because it's so grown up. And
yeah, well, and we recently had one in South Tampa. The property was actually in Dade City, good acreage. And the ingress egress was the CSX. So there was a railroad that rode next to it. And the only way to get on is using CSX and, you know, what they had deemed theirs, if you will. And so you had to use their property to get to it. And so one of the things that was holding it up was getting permission from them by the buyer to be able to use that for the property they were buying, because the seller already had it. But now the buyer has to get permission to do it himself. And so that was its own little challenge to get, you know, to really move forward with closing the contract.
we have an agent in South Tampa just called me last week, I think it was. And she has 3 properties tied up together as an assemblage, right? Where one buyer's going to come in, buy 3 different pieces of property and by 3 different people. And they're into their due diligence. And they found out that the middle property was deeded to Pinellas County. Right, so Pinellas County owns the property. Do you know what I'm talking about? But the reason, and the county said, we'll sell it to you, which is great. But then they researched the deed, and there was a restriction placed on the deed that the grantor gave it to the county to use as an easement to get to the other properties. But the restriction that was put on the deed said, if the county ever disposes of the property, it goes back to the heirs. And this is done like 40 years ago. So now the guy who sold it who gave it to the county is dead, and they got to track down his heirs, who now are in the catbird seat because they own the piece of property that's in the middle that gives the access to the other 2. Lots of games get played and things like that.
That's an interesting one there. There's a couple of moves that you got to get just to get to that's an interesting one there.
And my attitude is, hey, seller, you have a problem.
Uh-huh.
And the seller says, well, he's a FISBO, number 1, so we don't represent him. He's stuck his head in the sand. Now he's aware of the problem that he has. He goes, I don't care, somebody will buy it from me. Like it is. No, they're not.
That's right.
And you're holding up progress on another deal. That's kind of annoying.
Mm-hmm.
There's my favorite clause, paragraph 19, professional advice and broker liability. Broker advises seller and buyer to verify all facts and representations that are important to them and to consult appropriate and professional for legal advice and all that other stuff. Stress that one. Guys, you can't rely on me for this. You need an engineer, you need an attorney, you need a zoning land use guy. All this stuff needs to go. Paragraph 20 is interesting. The Commercial Real Estate Sales Commission Lien Act. And commercial real estate, which is this could be considered, if the property is commercial real estate as defined by section 475, Florida statutes, the following disclosure will apply. The Florida Commercial Real Estate Sales Commission Lien Act provides that when a broker has earned a commission by performing licensed services under a brokerage agreement with you, the broker may claim a lien against your net sales proceeds for the broker's commission. The broker's lien rights under the act cannot be waived before the commission is earned. cannot be waived. So basically, once you're under contract, I can put a lien on your property. So if it sells, I get paid before you get your proceeds. And you can't do that in residential. Nice try.
Yeah.
And this contract has it pre-written in there for us, if the property is commercial.
And what happens there? People get funny with the money. You get a $5 million property and everything's great. And then they start looking at the ledger and realizing, whoa, I'm paying this broker how much? Well, that's not fair. I don't want to pay him that anymore. And now you've got a lawsuit. So this protects the broker by putting that mechanic lien on there. And to get a clear title, that lien needs to be paid. And that lien is the commission. And of course, the title company is going to do their due diligence and review the documents, the listing agreement, and so forth, be able to even have that mechanic lien and then clean the title up by paying it off properly.
Well, you've probably seen this. Coldwell Banker Residential, the NRT companies, they actually instruct their agents to put this lien act into the residential contracts too. And it really pissed off a lot of regular brokers. And, Coldwell Banker, if you strike it, they'll let it go. But they have their agents put it in there so they can claim a lien.
Wow. I did not know that. That's good to know.
I think they stopped
Come to these classes.
but they used to do that. So it's good. It's not a bad thing, right? Let's say it's your listing and Coldwell Banker writes an offer and they put that clause in there. That means we get our commission too.
Yeah.
If they're going to put a lien against it. So it's not a bad idea, but it's just not traditional in our market. Anything else critical in here? Because we're over time right now.
This is it.
That's it. All right. So I'm not trying to scare you. I am trying to tell you that if you want to do vacant land, though, start studying it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Memorize this contract, write what it is. It's just most importantly, it's the buyer's responsibility. And there's a lot of stuff. They need an expert on their scene on the zoning side or the engineering side to know what they're getting. Unless you're doing a standard subdivision type of lot, vacant lot.
And the municipals are your friend when it comes to information.
Yep.
Get comfortable with calling them. If you can find someone there that's very nice that you can work with, get their extension, call them often, find out what's going on. I mean, that's why they're there, to help out.
And I'll tell you, it's true. I found this to be true. The county used to be in a really crappy old building and their attitudes were sucky.
Mm-hmm.
They moved into a really nice thing and all of their attitudes got really better. They really are very helpful, right? They want to help you understand and most of them know what they're doing. So if you're getting a listing, try to get the information ahead of time to make it more marketable to a buyer, right? Get everything you can from the seller. And if they don't have it, encourage them to find a way to get it because you'll get more money for the property.
Mm-hmm.
Because, look at my buyers, they get 500 grand invested because they bought something they knew nothing about. And they did a lot of investigation, spent a lot of money on surveys and engineering plans and plats and, lift stations and all the engineering design for all that type of stuff that had to happen. Right. And they're seriously committed. So we want to make sure we get them as much as we can. And we gave them a banker's box full of data that my sellers had on the property. Every approval for seawalls that were allowed, every approval for docks that were allowed, which all lapsed. Right. But they still had all the evidence of what they had. And it was just a nice way to convey property. The seller being helpful rather than a hindrance. So very cool. Otis.
All right.
We covered it all.
I think we did. I don't see anything in the chat. Wait a minute, hang on.
We got to thank you. Amazing class. Thank you all. Very nice.
Great.
Sweet.
Well, seize the
guys,
day.
happy Friday.
Have a great time.
And if we inspired some of you to get involved in vacant land, start studying vacant land. I'm telling you, there'll be a big need for it in the near future. Right?
Yeah, it's fun when you get to know what you're doing. And there's not a lot of people out there that know what they're doing. So when you get to know what you're doing, you start getting a good reputation as well.
Yeah.
Because generally when there's someone that's buying large plots of land, they know other people that may do the same thing. And then you become their go-to in some of those scenarios.
Like I'm working with a guy right now. He's they own the golf course here in town. And they also I sold them an extra 3-acre piece for a golf course clubhouse adjacent to their properties. They really needed a new clubhouse. And I'm back in touch with them again. And the rains lately have turned that site into a swamp. There's got to be 1.5 feet of water standing there. Wow. So they got to do something to mitigate that water or they're going to get turned into a wetland and not be able to build on the property. So I rode my bike over there yesterday and took photographs of it and sent it to them. and said, we really need to get this looked at. Got to drain it and fill it with dirt or something, or you're going to lose your rights. And there's big oak trees that have tippled over because the root structure is so shallow, and there's so much water that the land's so wet. This big oak just boom. So that's going to be a problem if they don't jump into it. Louisa, how would you find out if a piece of land with a code violation is worth purchasing? It's not listed, but I see the sign. You got to call the county and say, how much is this lien? Because that's going to have to be cleared up. And that's a real thing. Sellers forget about their land at times, and there'll be a fine, and it's just in perpetuity. There's getting fined every day for something they're not even thinking about.
Right. Lauren brings up a really good point. 30-day feasibility period is never enough. That's so true. Whenever you start that, kind of get an idea of what it's going to take to get the boring out there, how long it's going to take a geotechnical engineer or someone like that out there. Look at that ahead of time. What's the turnaround time on all of that? Is the property something you got to bush hog your way into it to get that done? How long is that going to take? We all know since COVID, everything's taken a little bit longer. And so definitely give yourself enough time for the feasibility study.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen a lot, and I've done myself. Like I sold South Shore Falls, the community over here. I sold that to Centex Homes. And, it's a standard joke, right? The builder comes in, gets their due diligence, and they come up with a problem. They ask for an extension, and they ask for another extension. You kind of got your hands tied, so you got to give them the extension. So we started writing in, your closing date is here. If you want an extension, it's going to cost you $50,000 for the first 30 days or 90 days. And then if you want to, we build a second extension date, and they'd have to pay more money, either applied to the purchase price or not applied to the purchase price, whichever we could negotiate. But we told them up front, this is what we're expecting you to do time-wise. And if you want more time, you're going to pay more. And it was in the contract up front, because they're all going to ask, if you go into the 30-day due diligence, you're going to need an extension. And if they don't give it to you, you're out your due diligence, money you spent, and it's just wasted. So ask for an extension up front if you think you're going to need it, or go in with a longer due diligence period to start with.
Exactly.
Mom is no. Well, we're all going to be in Florida 21, which starts Monday. So we're not going to do a manager meeting on Monday. Let me talk to the team about that, because I can do a sales meeting from Orlando. It's not hard. And Mike might want to do marketing Monday from Orlando too. So I'll send a note out about that. But thank you for reminding me to do that. Cool. All right. Happy Friday.
Have a great day, guys.
Stay cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Guys.
Good luck. Climate control.